LEGO recently subverted everyone's expectations with this $1,000 UCS Slice of the Death Star. So I gotta compare all three different styles of UCS Death Star to find out which version did it best and if this new Death Star is actually secretly good. And this video is sponsored by Rakuten, so more on them and how they can help you get extra cash back if you spend $1,000 on the new Death Star later. Now, because this is a special UCS comparison, I've added a sixth category to my typical comparison score sheet. At the top, you can now see packaging along with design, play, minifigs, value, and my opinion. We'll tally up those scores to figure out which of these Death Stars has done it best, and I fear it may prove to be a controversial conclusion at the end of the video, but nonetheless, we gotta find out which Death Star is truly the best Death Star. Now, quickly, some basic info. We start out with the 2005 version, 3,449 pieces, the Death Star 2. It originally retailed for $300 and adjusted for inflation in today's money, that's about $500. Now, 2016 set is notably very similar to 2008, but I've chosen the 2016 set to represent them because it is the better of the two, and it sits kind of smack dab in the middle as far as the years go, about a decade apart from each other Death Star. This one has 4,016 pieces and an original retail price of $500. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $675. Finally, we have the brand new $1,000 Death Star. It's got 9,023 pieces, and yeah, no need to adjust for inflation here. So those are the three Death Stars that'll be competing here, and I am stoked to get into it. Our first point of comparison has to be the packaging on these sets. Just glancing at the boxes, you can see how LEGO's kind of lost its soul over the years. I think 2005 undeniably has the best box art. First off, the wraparound Star Wars logo with the original trilogy edition call out at the bottom is just a classic vibe, and it really works with the Death Star. Not to mention the actual art on the box showing Endor behind there, as well as an actual space battle going on, really does make it feel like a LEGO Star Wars set. It feels really cool and grounded in a way. You look over to 2016 and you start to lose some of that. Sure, there's an explosion going on, but there's no actual real battle happening like we saw in 2005. There's no planet back there. It's just space. And then the ships just feel like copy-paste PNGs, like just in little clusters. Like it doesn't feel like an actual battle or anything going on. They're just like, oh, we have to have these here, so we'll throw them in there. And that's what it felt like. Versus this one, it feels like you're really in the battle over Endor there. Now, if you also check out the gold seal, the gold strip, and the gold lettering, like that feels nice for a UCS sets box. So I always loved that about the 2016 version. So yeah, some nice like key art to the box, but the actual art on the box, definitely leaning to 2005 here. And then we get into 2025. Things have fallen off a cliff. We've got this all black box art because LEGO sets now come for 18-year-olds. And to not be mistaken for a kid's toy, of course, you can't have any art. Why would an adult want art on their box for a LEGO Star Wars set? That would just be horrible. You got the Death Star name, which is clean. The UCS logo is clean, but like we had a really good thing going there in 2016. And yeah, it's just kind of soulless in a way. You know, compared to these, it makes this one look amazing, and it makes this one look like it belongs in a museum. Looking at the side profile on these boxes, though, my eyes are definitely drawn to 2025, and you can also see just how much thicker that newer box is. On their face, they're all just about the same, but 2025 is thick. The back of each of these boxes are, of course, also quite different. 2025, just very bland and soulless. 2016, mixing in more of that gold, so it does still feel like a UCS set in that way. It's all cohesive with its box. Absolutely love that, and it highlights a lot of the features and functions, as well as showing the backside of the Death Star. And then the 2005 version just has a couple different shots here of the Super Laser and the Super Star Destroyer. It's also got a ton of information that really you should find on the display plaque, but they also include it here on the box just because they have the space, which is nice. And you've got the actual Death Star, and the measurements are shown there. So very nice. Also got to love that Death Star 2 lettering at the bottom. I think they did a lot of lettering like that on some of those early UCS sets, so that's definitely nice too. But yeah, between the three boxes, I think it's pretty clear that 2025 just isn't quite what the old ones were. You know, I could be swayed either way on these, but I lean to 2005 as far as the boxes. The actual unboxing experience, though, is going to go in a very different direction. 2005, just a couple of white boxes, excuse the water damage, but a couple of white boxes, and you know, would have a bunch of bags and your instructions. The 2016 version didn't do anything special either, as you just found your parts and a plain white box inside again, but 2025 really ups the game, as even inside the flaps on the main black box, you're going to find some art, and then on all three of the numbered boxes inside, you're going to find movie shots and CGI shots kind of plastered all over. Just a lot of fun stuff that you might enjoy as part of the unboxing experience. Makes it feel a little bit more premium for its price compared to the older ones, so that's definitely a nice change that you saw with this newer one. Taking a look at the instruction manuals, boy, have things changed throughout the years. You literally now get 6 of them. We used to live in a society, it used to be bound. Look how beautiful that is. Not that these are bad, but these were just so beautiful with the binding. It's something that I really do miss about these classic LEGO Star Wars UCS sets. But anyway, the 2005 version, just the box art on the front, of course, nothing special inside the front panel, and if you had to guess over under on how many pages a 3,449 piece set has, you would take the over on 99.5, and you'd lose a lot of money because this only goes up to page 99. That's the end. Page 99. And technically, I guess 100 on the back. But still, pretty crazy that it's only 99 numbered pages in this instruction manual for a 3,500 piece build. It's because the build is quite repetitive. There's a lot of like build this 8 times and build the big thing here twice and then flip it upside down basically. So yeah, that's why it's only 100 pages, but still insane. No frills instruction manual though. This one really upped the game. So you still got the same box art on the front, whatever, but when you open it up, you're gonna see a lot of writing. It's very cool, very premium, really primes you for the build experience, talks about the Death Star in Star Wars, talks a lot about the actual LEGO Death Star and what the different rooms and things are inside of it. It goes really in depth with Q&A sections, both about the model and the minifigures, back when they cared about making minifigures great every time, and there's just a lot of things to love. And they even talk about the art director on this set, right? I don't feel like they got an art director for the newer sets. It doesn't feel that way, certainly with the way the box art is, but they got all the minifigs listed out, and then they go into the same stuff in different languages, but pretty insane. And then the actual instructions are otherwise normal instructions. It's just like 300 pages. It's a lot. I feel like they could have done something cooler on the back, but the back of it literally mimics the back of the box, and oh, there's something cooler, I guess, although it's like really oddly framed, so I didn't even realize that was there. So those are the earlier instruction manuals, and then you get 6 with the newer set. Now, I think there's a huge benefit to this in that if you have multiple people that want to build the same set, it's very easy to do that without needing like an iPad or something. Like you can't really split up these manuals without ripping them in half. These ones you can obviously just hand a different manual to someone else. I also love the design of these. I think this is just a fun way to do the instruction manual for a Death Star, kind of as like Death Star plans. And yeah, otherwise they are mostly normal instruction manuals, although at the front of each, it's gonna point out which section you have. So obviously gonna be different depending on which manual you have. And then it does have that UCS write-up that we saw in this one, just split throughout all of the different manuals. It also highlights the figures that you're gonna build within the specific manual as well, so that's also nice. But yeah, it really just varies based on the manual here, what you're gonna see. Really cool stuff regardless, and I think really this is probably the most ideal building experience, but as a UCS collector, these feel like the most premium style of instruction manuals you could have. So that's everything regarding packaging on each of these models. It's certainly an experience consistent with its time in each case here, and it's hard to pick a best of the 3, I would say. I would almost say 2005 has the best actual box art, 2016 maybe the best instruction manual, and 2025 the best interior boxes. And I mean, the instruction manuals are cool, but this like just has aura as a manual to me. As a tiebreaker though, I'll default to the set with the best actual box, and I think that's 2005, so it'll get 3 points here. 2016 will get 2 points, and 2025 will get 1 point. Anyway, before we talk about the built design for each of these 3 styles of Death Star, something that some people would say doesn't make any sense for the 2025 Death Star Slice model, I want to tell you something that makes complete sense for you to be doing when you buy LEGO Star Wars sets in 2025. Now, I'll be using this video sponsor Rakuten. Rakuten is the largest cashback website, partnering with over 3,500 of the biggest name brands. I've been using them for years to make every dollar count when buying anything from my mattress, my Disney Plus subscription, sports tickets, and you better believe it, LEGO Star Wars sets. I recently used Rakuten to buy the $1,000 Death Star, and they got me an extra $30 cash back. Plus, if I had used my Rakuten credit card, I'd have received an additional 4% or $40 cash back, meaning I'd have gotten $70 back on that one purchase. I think it's silly not to utilize Rakuten when shopping, and they make it super convenient with with their free browser extension that pops up to remind you to click through and activate, so you get every dollar you deserve. Alternatively, you can always click through from Rakuten.com to activate your cash back. Either way, once you're through, you just shop like normal. Now, all of that sounds great, but it's actually even better because you'll get a $50 cashback bonus when you sign up with my link in the description and spend $50 within the next 90 days. I think that's a deal too good to pass up, and if you plan on buying Lego, especially with this being literally the most expensive Lego set ever, why pay more than you have to? Rakuten, sign up, link in the description below, or right now, back to the comparison. Getting into comparing the designs of these Death Stars, it is of course important to remember that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, and beauty can be extremely subjective. Big emphasis on extremely. And because each of these Death Stars is designed fundamentally different from the ground up to be a completely different experience, it's a little tough to objectively compare the designs. Like if you've seen some of my other comparisons like Grievous's Starfighter or the Ghost or the U-Wing or just any of the other normal ships and vehicles that conceptually when LEGO remakes them they are basically the same just with updated designs, it's a much easier comparison to make as far as this is concerned because you just kind of take a glance at it and you go, yeah, that one's much better than that one. Clearly the techniques got better. This one is not that simple. 2005 clearly trying to be an accurate representation of the Return of the Jedi Death Star, still in construction there on the right side, top and bottom. It's also got that small version of the Super Star Destroyer to scale, which is an amazing thing to have in a set from 2005. You got the Super Laser, which I would say is a little bit long from a design perspective. It's a little easy to knock off. Dang it. And so that's kind of a simple thing to compare apples to apples. Okay, that one fell off pretty easily too. Let's try the newest one. Yeah, they all fall off. I knew it. So I guess while everything's changed in a way, nothing's changed. I guess another thing we can compare, because it'll be the same on each, will be the dish for the Death Star laser. So 2005, a lot of gaps there. Definitely didn't notice that for a long time, but definitely noticing it now. 2016, much cleaner, much better, definitely nicer. And then 2025, probably as far as this category goes, peak, maybe? I don't know, it kind of depends on whether you like the studs showing or the inverse showing, because you usually are probably used to studs, and they definitely went in the other direction there, literally. I think that's about it for things that all three of these Death Stars are gonna share. Like, are y'all expecting me to compare the top of each of these Death Stars? The newest one is flat, while the older ones are round, which is nice, I suppose, for their shape. I suppose looking at the exterior of the Death Star, the paneling is very smooth on the new one versus 2005's all studded design, and I think actually for both, they work very well for their designs. I don't dislike one or the other, or prefer one over the other, because just for the design it works, and for the design here it also works. I guess it's smooth on this one if you want to break it down like that, with studs on top sometimes, but I mean, it's not really in that conversation the same way. The other element of design with these Death Stars would of course be the design of the individual rooms. I mean, you look at the Emperor's Throne Room here for 2025, and you look at 2016, yeah, big difference. And even if you look at this one as a playset, this is practically the same play experience. It's an open throne room with a throne that has a spinnable chair. Same exact thing, just much uglier. Looking at the older trash compactor, you just push this to close the walls in on the minifigs that aren't there. And then for the new one, there's a knob on the back, so you spin it and it also closes. But you can tell the new one looks way nicer and functions way better than the old one. You've got a section here in the detention block, and you can see the sticker that makes the hallway look longer. Well, they've also, of course, got that on the new one, so pretty cool similarity there. Just the color of the floor is way more accurate. There's like the step up, which they actually have represented on the old one, which is pretty cool. You can see the floor changing elevation as it goes into the detention center. Very cool. The control panels on this old one, though, are super ugly compared to the control panels on the new one. Just a much better design here. And then some more of the detail in there is done way better. You can see the gray versus the blue in here. That definitely sticks out. And looking at the design of the detention door, it flips open with this knob here to give you access to where the minifigs could be, like Leia. And while this isn't the play section, I mean, this one effectively accomplishes the same thing. You open it up and you have access to the area with minifigs like Leia in there. Even better though, perhaps, they made it possible to access this section by pulling the side off and sliding it right out. So you can actually pull the whole section out to very easily place your minifigs in, or take them out, or play with it if you wanted to, even though it's not a playset. Another great comparison is the tractor beam that Obi-Wan switches off. You can see the build here for 2025 is just gorgeous. 2016, honestly, it looks like I built that. That is just disgusting looking in comparison. It's wild. Next, we've got the Imperial Meeting Room. Not too bad for 2016, but 2025, again, just takes takes it up to an insane level, especially the detail on the back wall. So nice. We've also got the chasm that Luke and Leia are going to swing across on the rope, and you can see that is much better represented on the new version, and it even has a retractable floor. So, you know, even considering play features, that's better, but just the displayability of it alone or design of it is insanely better on the new one. Oh, and you got to give credit where credit is due. There were stickers on 2016 for those Imperial pill lights, and now they are printed, and they look a lot better printed in the back there. It's so nice. Another great area to look at side by side will be the hangar here, and for 2016, we've got Vader's tie hanging in there, just kind of covering everything up, so we'll move that out of the way. You can see you got the lift here, and then you also have the arrows on the floor, some crates, and just a flat black floor with studs. Kind of the same deal here, just in a different scale. So a couple more arrows represented, as well as basically a studless floor, just a few studs for where they want you to put minifigs versus, you know, endless possibilities here. And then you've got a much more nicely designed lift here versus this. The shape is definitely still there, but you are missing all of those extra sticker details and things that look much nicer on this one. The doorway, also represented for 2025, there in 2016, looks nice in both cases. One advantage of 2016, I would say, is that it actually has a physical door that you can open and close here. That's really nice. There's a knob on the other side somewhere that actually does it. You don't have to do it by hand, but pretty cool design for that. That probably gets beat out in that small section just for having a door. There's also this giant laser cannon from the bottom of the Death Star here, and there's a much smaller one on the new one that also looks nice, but like this one's probably a little better for 2016. It just wouldn't fit here. The scale doesn't work, that's for sure. And in case you were curious, that's what the hangar looks like with that GWP TIE Fighter hanging in there. It doesn't cover up nearly as much as this Vader's tie does on the 2016 model, although this does swivel so you can move it out of the way, and this is very stationary in comparison. It just is definitely better there. And how could I forget to shout out the epic design of the back wall for the stars as you basically look out into space? Like, that's incredible too. So clearly the hangar is better designed on the new one versus the old one. And then I think there's one more important thing to talk about as far as the design between these two sets, and that's the function and look of the elevator. Yeah, there's an elevator shaft in the middle of the 2016 Death Star. That's your elevator. It's on a string. Putting it on the string absolutely sucks. I hated doing it, but you just twist this knob and it can send the elevator all the way down or pull it right back up. So pretty simple elevator. It works, but the new one is 100 times better. First off, they got doors on all the levels, which makes it look super clean. And then if you can find that little white strip, you can actually know which level the elevator is on to place your minifigs in or take them out of if you've already put them in there. There's a knob on top that you spin, and you can see some of the mechanism behind here. Just pretty insane to look at. It is much better designed on the newer Death Star. It is night and day what they've been able to do with the elevator function alone, let alone everything else with this new Death Star. I feel like I could spend all day talking about some of the fun little designs and Easter eggs that are included in this set and just how great it is, but I've got a 1-hour review of it for that reason, so check that out. I want to rein us back in here, and which of these sets has the worst design of the three? I think it's pretty clearly 2016. 1, it's really ugly. 2, people wanted a big spherical Death Star with this new one. Big spherical Death Star with panels. That's what people thought when they heard $1,000. I thought that too. The problem with that is if you put panels on a model like that, well, now you covered up everything that you spent so much money on or budget on the inside, and you're not able to enjoy that. Simultaneously, if you take the panels off, well, now you've got a bunch of panels on the ground they're on the ground. What are you going to do with a bunch of panels? Throw them in a box? And so you've wasted money there. And either way, you're wasting a lot of money on something that you're not going to be able to enjoy. With the other two Death Stars, the benefit of either of these designs is simply that at a glance, you basically get to enjoy the full experience of what you paid for. That's it. It's so much nicer than that with panels. I've had experience with it with a knockoff. It is not as good as you think it would be. So when it comes to the true best Death Star design, I think I gotta say 2005, simply because it literally looks like the Death Star. That's a big part of it. Although 2025 is an amazing looking model in its own right, it's just conceptually so different than what I think is truly a UCS Death Star like we see in 2005. That being said, we can all acknowledge that like literally all of the building techniques and design work in this on like the micro individual level is better than anything you probably see in that set. But as a concept for something that I would want as a displayable Death Star, I very much lean to 2005. So I can see those being kind of one or the other on design. That one simply has to be the worst design though. So I'm going to give 3 points to 2005, 2 points to 2025, and 1 point to 2016. Moving into the playability category, I have already gone ahead and taken that 2005 model off the table simply because the only play feature it has is falling off a ledge and blowing up like it does in Return of the Jedi. Definitely not an ideal play feature. So we're gonna go section by section on this Death Star and compare to this one, and you'll see this one is no slouch when it comes to either play features or just straight up functionality. Like, it's got a lot packed in there, and even some things that this 2016 Death Star doesn't have. Now this one will have things that this one doesn't have, so fair enough, right? But it's pretty crazy that this $1,000 Death Star that you might think of as simply a display set that doesn't do anything is very, very far from that. Let's get started. So throughout the rest of this section, my goal is not to show every feature and function of the 2016 Death Star. That's what the review of the set is for, but really to compare what this set does that this set also does or perhaps doesn't do. So we're gonna go section by section and do it that way. So starting out with the Death Star laser cannon, that is something that can be spun side to side, which is very cool. You can also twist it up here without having to actually touch it and potentially knock off some of the lasers. And then there's also this little bit up top that you can spin, and when you spin it, the whole thing can be moved up or down, which is very cool. So a very, very functional Death Star laser cannon, and as a playset, obviously that is what you're going to be looking for. You can see it's quite complex in there, and as we look up to the 2025 Death Star cannon, you're not going to be getting any playability, no movement there, but it does look cool, but not for play. The area behind the Death Star cannon does allow for a couple of minifigs to stand here with some nice printed control panels, a little bit of that red, black, and white board that you'll see kind of repeated at the top of this Death Star, a little red, white, and black pattern, obviously much more accurate on the newer display focus set. You also have another control area below behind the Death Star, and I think, yeah, obviously this is going to be better for play in 2016, but dang, it looks nice in the new one. We're going to find Death Star cannons on both of these Death Stars. This version from 2016 can be twisted side to side. You can move the cannon down, you can move the cannon up, so a lot of range of motion there. You've also got a double barrel spring-loaded shooter. Those can be shot off by just pushing back on these little buttons here, so one at a time, just like that. Pretty cool. And then you've also got space for a couple of minifigs with control panels. Definitely a lot going on with this Death Star cannon, and they made it as playable as possible, and it still looks really good. The 2025 version kind of pokes out the side and can be hidden away with this panel. Alternatively, you can also lift this up and see it, and it's very small. You can see just how much larger that other one is. But this one still has a little bit of functionality, as you can push it down, you can raise it up. That's about it. That's all you can do. I mean, you also have the spot for the minifig with a control panel as well, so that's nice. It's just nowhere near as playable as the old one, but it still retains a little functionality, which is nice. But we'll close that up, and that's how I would personally display it, because I think it'd be a bit silly to be missing this side panel or just have the panel up like that. Like, it looks stupid like that. So always going to leave it like that, seeing as this is more display oriented anyway. The next spot in this quadrant is where Leia can watch Alderaan get blown up. So on one panel, you've got the planet just fine. You flip it around and it's now been blown up. Pretty simple feature, works very nicely, but they really did improve it with this newer set, because here on one panel, you can see Alderaan there. And then on the side of the Death Star, you've got this knob, which will turn over your picture. And so you can much more easily switch from Alderaan to a blown up version of Alderaan. It's a much cooler way to do it. When it comes to the trash compactor, on the older version, you're gonna find a couple pieces of trash at the bottom. You got a big stick you could put in Chewbacca's hand to try to hold the doors at bay. But all you really have to do if you want to close the doors is push this on top. It'll close everything up, and with Chewbacca as our test dummy, he does fit in there just fine. Pull it back out, and they open right back up. So a nice simple function, but it does work very well for play. The other play feature is the Dianoga. You can see the eye peeking up through here, but he really has his whole body submerged underneath all the trash, which is really cool. Really smart function, and then that allows you, if you really want to wiggle him around, to move him around by hitting his body on the bottom side. So it works well as a play feature, and you get the full Dianoga included. I did nearly forget, they also have the door at the back, so you can actually open that door and allow your minifigs to escape. So pretty cool with this one. You can also drop minifigs into the trash compactor by opening that bit there, dropping them down the hole, and they fall right in. On the 2025 version, there's a knob on the back. You just twist that knob, the doors will close, and simultaneously the Dianoga eye raises up. Really dope function, as well as you have the ability to pull the top off, and that will give you much easier access to your figures inside if you need to place them properly or grab them or whatever. Like, there's a lot easier access on this set compared to the older one with the top removed. And it gets even crazier when you realize there is a trash chute up higher on the Death Star that you can place a minifig into and have them fall into the trash compactor. The next play feature is Obi-Wan turning off the tractor beam. So you got the levers you can move up and down on either side here, and then there's actually an extra play feature with this being pulled out. You can literally physically have it turn off. The blue light turns off. So pretty dang cool play feature there. Works really well, but looks really ugly. And then on the newer set, you can have Obi-Wan stand here and hold on to the lever and move the lever up and down, but as a play feature, it's not quite the same. It doesn't actually have the function of physically turning off in the same cool way, so not quite as good. Our next section will be the detention block, which we've already seen part of from both, where they have the holes for the trash chute to go down to the trash compactor. But aside from that, we'll close that back up, you've got the little control panels at the front of this one. You've got the same thing on this one. Looks a bit nicer here, but effectively the same as far as a play feature is concerned. Little control panel here, no control panel there, so maybe that's a little something extra that this one has. Some more stickers there, more fun, imaginative play perhaps. You got the stair step up and the hallway. Same deal here on the 2025 set. You do have this, which is on a swivel, which is definitely better for play than the newer version, because those are just kind of stuck at the back there. They are on like hinge pieces, so you could move them a little bit, but it's definitely not nearly as much as that is able to move. And then finally, we have the actual cell, which can be accessed by flipping that up and also pulling back the gate at the back, so you can get easier access through the back door. Either way, you'd be able to put minifigs in there and play with them, and it's the same deal with that newer one. You just pull the gate open on the front, and then they also have that section on the back that is removable. So in either case, about the same, I'd say. At the very top, we've got the seating section for Imperials. All of the seats on this one swivel, and the table in the middle is removable. It makes it a little easier maybe to reach to the back, or maybe if you want to use it for storage. Technically the same for 2025, except some of the chairs don't swivel. The ones on the corners do. The table in the middle is still removable. Makes it easier to access figures maybe at the back. And then the addition that this one has is actually a nice door here. So you've got a doorway that the figures can walk through that you didn't have on the previous model. That's nice. The throne room is pretty straightforward. You've got this section of scaffolding that can be knocked down. It's not the best feature, but it does work. 2025, I think, does it a bit better. Just push in there, it falls in a better way. The throne chair spins 360 degrees. Same deal for 2016, just with a simpler design. And then you have this little area that Palpatine could fall down if you wanted to, so that's pretty cool. You can do the exact same thing over here with the much larger areas on either side, just like that. Overall, I mean, they basically provide the same experience, just 2025 looks much nicer than 2016. But yeah, I mean, I'd call it basically a wash there as far as the actual functionality at its core. Just one is very ugly. Now, there's not a straight comparison for the cannons on top of this Death Star. These are unique. They are not included on this one, but these I think do look very cool. They move together and then individually as far as their individual guns. And then you can also use this little lever on the bottom to move them together if you want, which is pretty dang cool. I don't think you really needed this thing on the bottom, but it's nice that they included it. So looks dope, works well. Swinging Luke and Leia across the chasm on the 2016 Death Star is done with this string, and it's kind of fun. If you put them a little lower, maybe it'll swing a little bit further, but it works very well. And then on 2025, they really overhauled the whole feature. There's a little knob at the front of the throne room here, just spinning that knob back and forth. And so I would argue maybe not as fun of a play feature just because it's not on string where it's more free flowing, but they do also have the walkway beneath, which the old one does not. And so that can be retracted to actually increase the stakes of them making their move here, or actually like force them to do it, I guess. But either way, it's a much more complete function or representation of the scene than what we see in 2016. So yeah, a lot of little things this set does better for play, even though it's not a play set. It's pretty wild. And then we've got a couple more rooms that do not exist on this newer Death Star. You've kind of got this maintenance room, I suppose, where you could put some junk. You got your extra stormtrooper helmets, little table here that can be lifted up and reveal a knob here that is going to spin Vader's TIE Fighter in the hangar below if you want. You've also got a bunch of tools here, little desk, chair, like a lot of nice stuff for play, as well as your knob for your elevator, which will drop your figures down or raise them up. I know we take a look at this during the design section too, but it is obviously a play feature first and foremost, and so as a play feature, I think it's still better on that newer set regardless, but it's very nice that it's included here too, especially for the age of the original design. Now, as far as play features for the hangar, I actually think the old one beats out the new one here. You of course have the playable builds. The Imperial Shuttle can place a figure in the cockpit or in the like troop bay in it. The Vader's TIE Fighter of course can just fit Vader in the cockpit or a pilot or whatever. But we can pull this off of there, and with that out of the way, you've got ample space to put figures and play around in here. With it in the way, yeah, it's a bit of a different story. So we move that out of the way. This of course can be pushed to a side. You got the control panel for the door here, which you can push and open by hand, or there's a knob in this section, which we already looked at, but the knob here can open or close the door by twisting it. So it works very, very well either way there. Now there's another section down here that's not included on the newer Death Star, and this is kind of like a little maintenance area. You've got this cool little crane arm that can be moved and twisted and can claw onto maybe an astromech droid or something. You've got a weapons rack, a ladder, nice opening to your elevator. Love the little caution line on the floor. And then we have an actual functioning lift. That is something that is completely absent on the newer set. There's nothing going on down there, but on this set we do have it, and so you could place a figure or whatever you want on there. You twist it here and it will lift up to the upper level of the hangar. Now while it's hardly accessible, there is technically one more section for play on the old Death Star where you have this full section underneath where you could place figures. There's a railing, there's some canisters and things. The problem is, like, my hand cannot actually fit under here. You basically have to pull it to the edge of the table, quite dangerously, I might add, to be able to actually do anything. But the elevator does also reach down to this level, so technically it's part of the play experience to be able to access this level. It's just a pretty bad one because it's so tight down here. It's like 4 bricks tall. It's really not good, but it is part of the play experience. I feel like I've been all over the place, and I haven't even mentioned some of the things the 2025 Death Star does for play that the 2016 Death Star doesn't do at all, like the Vader's meditation chamber, where you can lower the top onto Vader to conceal him. You've also got a door outside of his meditation chamber that can close off minifigs from walking in. You've got other doors throughout the Death Star that can be opened and closed. There's other Easter egg-like features like opening and closing this little section here into the core of the Death Star, or making it blow up if you really want to, like that. I don't know if that's what people do. And how could I forget the best play feature of them all? The panel on top can be lifted up to reveal the hot tub stormtrooper. You can actually pull his whole hot tub assembly out if you want to display that outside or leave him in there, and pop this door off so you can actually see him in there, which is really sick. Either way, the hot tub stormtrooper section is kind of a fun both display and play thing. And yeah, all of a sudden you can see this 2025 Death Star. If you don't think it's better than 2016 for play, it's certainly like 95% of the way there, which is insane for a set that I look at as a purely display model, that it really does have 95% of the functionality that this one has, and in some cases has functions that it doesn't have. Like, pretty insane. Now, it is like twice the price, so I get that. Obviously, they're going to have a little bit more room to do a little bit more with some more different rooms and things, but it's still pretty insane that you would look at a set that's at its core literally a playset, and a set that was made for display, and be like, well, it also is actually surprisingly a pretty good playset too. So I'm still going to give 2016 the crown for best playset, but I feel like if you ask me this question in a year, I might sour on the 2016 one more and change my mind. But for now, we're going to go 3 points to 2016, 2 points to 2025, and 1 point to 2005. Now we're going to compare all of the minifigures between these 3 Death Stars, and it's definitely all over the place because you start out in 2005 getting 0 minifigs included. That was definitely the norm at the time, and there were many UCS sets following this that didn't include figures, but if this did release today, I would expect to see 2 included. So this is obviously going to be the ultimate loser of the minifigure category, but that being said, I don't look at it as lesser of a set because it didn't include minifigs. It's simply a product of its time. Again, it wouldn't fly today, but for 2005, acceptable. Moving on, the real comparison here is between 2016 and 2025. You got a lot of minifigures in 2016, 25 of them. That was plenty to fill out that set, but 2025 really turned it up a notch and included 38 minifigures, and you probably wouldn't believe me, but 38 still probably wasn't even enough. That's crazy, but true. With this first group of figures, you either see no changes like in Chewbacca, or some minor changes and upgrades like the addition of Darth Vader's arm printing or Luke Skywalker's hairpiece, but no crazy talking points. A couple other figs here where you do see some minor but more noteworthy upgrades, I would say, are Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. The Luke is just much better than the Luke that we saw in 2016, and the Han Solo, while maybe at first glance looks the exact same, the printing quality I didn't realize had gotten so much better. I still don't think it's quite where it needs to be, but when you put them side by side, LEGO has clearly upped their game, at least with this Han Solo in particular, with their printing quality over the last decade. So that's definitely something that's nice to see, and something that I didn't realize had happened until I put these figures right next to each other. Where things really get mixed up, I would say, is with the mouse droid. You are going to see a largely similar design, but they have taken that 1x1 brick and flipped it upside down. And in the words of Phil Schiller,
courage. The courage to move on, do something new that betters all of us.
Just incredible work by LEGO to deliver that mouse droid experience we have all been frothing at the mouth for. Jokes aside, moving on, first big downgrade I would say is Emperor Palpatine, more specifically his face print, and more specifically than that, the lack of pupils for his eyes. Everything else about him could be argued is better. You get a new hood piece, you get a new lightning piece, you get a new print, but the eyes just ruin the look of the character to me. You can't not have pupils on a character like this. It's disgusting. Another downgrade, or perhaps better presented as a great example of LEGO's modern day greed, is the lack of additional Stormtrooper helmets for Han and Luke in their Stormtrooper disguises. You see those included in 2016, you don't see them included in 2025 in their most expensive set ever. Just crazy. The Stormtroopers also did receive a major design overhaul. You do see a new helmet mold. It's dual molded, which is nice, but some people definitely do not like that newer Stormtrooper helmet, and very understandably so. It's a big mix-up from what we had in the past. The torso design has also been reworked in the last decade, as well as the hips being changed out from black to white. Just, I would say, makes it look a bit cleaner without the black hips, but yeah, overall big changes to the Stormtroopers that could be seen as an upgrade, could be seen as a downgrade. I think this one is debatable, unlike some other things. Now, we do see a true upgrade here in R2-D2. At first glance, you don't see much, but when you turn him around, you do now have the addition of that back printing, which is just premium. It's nice to have. The Imperial Astromech droids between the sets are obviously different droids, but they both provide essentially the same thing, and they both lack back printing, even though they can do it for R2 in 2025. They couldn't do it for the new Imperial Astromech. Just, yeah, pretty sad to see that penny pinching there for other Astromech droids. Now, as we move down to our Imperial Protocol droids, you do see the addition of eye printing and foot printing that kind of upgrade the figure from the previous one. And then on the topic of Protocol droids, if you look to the C-3PO, at first glance it looks very similar, but you do again get the addition of foot printing, and you get the addition of arm printing. But this is where I have a great example of why the newer Death Star figs aren't what they should be compared to 2016. You can't argue that the newer Death Star's C-3PO isn't better than 2016, but the issue I have is that in 2016, every figure that LEGO put in those sets was the best version of that figure that they had released to that point. And in C-3PO's case, that's not happening here. And that's one of those major things that is now wrong with LEGO Star Wars in 2025. Not giving it your best at every possible turn for a $1,000 set is just so dirty to me. And another great example of that has to be your Imperial officer, starting with Grand Moff Tarkin, who should be getting dual molded legs along with Taji and Modi and Yularen. Yularen should have black legs, not dual molded legs. But there's a slew of characters that should have had dual molded legs in this newer Death Star set that don't. And you might say, well, the original version didn't have dual molded legs, but that's because no dual molded legs had made their way into LEGO Star Wars to this point in 2016. Dual molded legs were still a newer concept, but a bunch of Imperial officers in prior UCS sets at this point have gotten dual molded legs, but now for their most expensive one ever, they're not getting it. And so as a straight comparison to 2016, inherently a character like Grand Moff Tarkin isn't worse. I would argue might be just marginally better. Like, they've slightly changed the design, it might look a little bit cleaner, yada yada yada, but the problem is they're no longer giving it their best, which isn't what the case was in 2016, where with every figure, they gave it their best, even if it hasn't stood the test of time, perhaps. Now, moving into our more general Imperial officers and crew members, the first difference is that there are now more of them, and that's great. It's good to have more figures to fill more rooms in your newer Death Star. It just makes sense that we have more on the more expensive, bigger set, so that's good. What I don't necessarily find myself loving is that move away from the accuracy of what we actually see on screen in Return of the Jedi. I think the best example is this officer here, same exact outfit from 2016, now in 2025, except he's a woman. And I would just prefer in all cases, one way or another, that it be accurate to what we see actually on screen, especially for a set that you're calling Ultimate Collector Series. You would expect it to have screen accurate stuff, and they've really gone away from that here. And if you do buy and enjoy it for that reason, that's great, but generally when I'm looking at a UCS set, I am looking for movie accuracy in as many ways as reasonably possible. And that is definitely something that has changed a lot since 2016, and it would be unfair to make this comparison and not point that out. The final four minifigures here, I think by most are seen as the best minifigs between between any of these sets in Galen Erso, Director Krennic, your Imperial Dignitary, and the Hot Tub Stormtrooper? Yeah, they did that. These are the minifigures that bring all the boys to the yard, so to speak, and it might be enough for many people to crown 2025 as having the best minifig selection and better minifigs in 2016, and I really lean that way. I do think on the whole 2025 is better, but I do have those couple of reservations, like the lack of movie accuracy with a lot of characters. Like, it's a UCS set, it just should have movie accurate things. I don't think that's too hot of a take. I think that's what 99.9% of UCS buyers would be looking for, but perhaps even less acceptable is LEGO not putting the best possible versions of each figure in sets like this. You know, it's $1,000 and you're not getting a dual molded leg with C-3PO or dual molded legs on your Imperial officers. Like, those sort of things should be there as well. And those are two major reservations where LEGO is not doing their best like they used to in 2016. That's not to say 2016 is necessarily better. That's much more subjective. But LEGO is not putting their best foot forward like they used to. That is not subjective. So when you look at them all side by side, I think it's pretty clear 2005 has the best minifigs. No drama. I mean, it's just easier when there's nothing, right? I'm joking. I think 2025 is the better figure selection overall, like getting more Stormtroopers, getting the 4 fun figures with the Dignitary, the Hot Tub Trooper, Krennic, and Galen Erso. Like, you gotta have stuff like that. You get more named Imperial officers, which is great to see. And in general, the characters are mostly upgraded, but you know, there's definitely some give and take there, unfortunately. So that's everything I gotta say about the minifigs between these. Here is your current score update, and let's get into what I think may be a very controversial value for money comparison. Comparing the value of these 3 Death Stars can be made super simple by just considering price per piece and calling it a day, or it can be super complex by thinking about things like the unboxing experience, or the quality of the minifigs, and do they have dual molded legs like they should, or the actual design of the Death Star. Do you value having a Death Star that looks like a Death Star, having a Death Star that's a playset, or having a Death Star that doesn't look like a Death Star but is the Death Star and has really cool display rooms of all the scenes from the Death Star? Like, there's a lot of different considerations, I think, that matter for value on top of the simple ones. Now, we'll of course start simple though. We are going to be using inflation adjusted prices because it wouldn't be fair to compare apples to oranges here. Now, I don't know what the result of this section is going to be, but I definitely got to say up front that I think the $1,000 Death Star, even if it turns out to be the worst value, I think still gets a lot of unfair flack because of its $1,000 price, simply because it's the most expensive LEGO set they have ever made. People look at it and they're like, well, it must therefore be the most overpriced and unfair LEGO set they've ever made, when just eyeballing it here, I don't quite think that's the case. And so I think let's get into the data and find out if my eye test is really backed up by the hard numbers. And we will of course be using inflation adjusted numbers for the retail prices in this section, because otherwise it would be apples to oranges. We want to try to keep it at apples to apples. So starting out 2005, $500 adjusted for inflation. Your price per piece there is going to be 14.5 cents per piece. You move into 2016, adjust that for inflation up to $675, and your price per piece is around 16.8 cents. And then for 2025, no adjustment needed, you're looking at just 11.1 cents per piece. Best price per piece of all 3 sets. Now, there are of course more considerations to price per piece than simply looking at the number on the paper and going, well, that's the lowest one and therefore it's the best value, because this set unquestionably would be using much smaller pieces on average than both that set and that set. Obviously a lot of large panel pieces on that one and a lot of larger bricks on this one than you're going to find on this one. And so for that reason, the price per piece isn't necessarily a great indicator of value, because all of the pieces are different. And you also get more minifigs in this one. You get a bunch of minifigs in this one, and you get no minifigs in that one. So price per piece doesn't really account for that, and all of the printed elements that are required for the minifigures, or all of the printed elements that they use for the backing of the Death Star lights. Now, as everybody's probably aware, there are also a lot of stickers on the newer Death Star, but that's also part of the value, I suppose, in a way. It costs some money to make a large sticker sheet. I don't like defending them for that, but it's true. So I think price per piece doesn't get us particularly far here, but people do often use it as the ultimate indicator of value to them, and when you break it up like that, 2025 is definitely better. I think price per minifig can also be a very interesting indicator of value. It obviously doesn't take into account the quality of the minifigs and the lack of dual molded legs on the newer Death Star figures that everybody wanted, but it does give you a good idea of, is LEGO actually giving you the right number of figures for the price of the set, at least relative to some of their older sets. Obviously 2005 doesn't have any figures, so so kind of omitted from this category, but 2016 had 25 of them, so you're looking at about $27 per figure. Moving over to 2025, you're going to be looking at $1,000 with 38 figures, which comes out to about $26 per figure. A marginal improvement, but an improvement. You can't argue with that. And the reason I break it down like this is when I first looked at these sets, I looked at 2016. It was $500 originally with 25 figures. You'd think for $1,000 you should get double the figures, but when you adjust for inflation, it's actually more spot on than you would imagine. Still think this should have had a couple more stormtroopers, but you know, you can't have everything, I guess, for $1,000. Price per gram can also be another very good metric. It, of course, still doesn't take into account the fact that some of these sets have minifigs and some of them don't, and that, of course, will change kind of how valuable each gram of plastic is to somebody, I would say. But when it comes to price per gram, the weights online were a little bit confusing to me, and I wasn't sure if they included the actual packaging for some of the products, and so I just took these to my scale, and I weighed myself with and without them and found the difference. So these numbers are approximate. They are definitely not perfect, but I think they are more than close enough for the purposes of this comparison. And so in 2005, again, adjusted for inflation, price per gram, it's going to be about 10.6 cents per gram. 2016 has a much higher number of 14.3 cents per gram. However, you got to consider all the minifigs included, and that would be a significant reason that it would be more expensive per gram of plastic. And I think that's fair. Now, when you look at 2025, things get interesting. I don't think you're going to believe the number. 11.9 cents per gram. Significantly less than 2016 and just 1.3 cents per gram more than 2005, which again didn't include any figures, didn't have any printed parts. Like, there's a lot to consider here, but if you've been paying attention, 2025 has been putting together a pretty good case to be the best value. So when you break these sets down by their inflation adjusted prices, again, $500, $675, and $1,000, I just think one of them is clearly the worst value. It's not 2005, it's not 2025, it's 2016. A $675 playset. It doesn't look particularly appealing. Obviously, it's got some nostalgia bias there for a lot of people, myself included. I love the 2008 and 2016 models as playsets and things, but they're objectively much uglier sets than the other two. And when you're spending this kind of money on a LEGO Star Wars set, I'd argue a big part of the value is going to be the displayability, which this one just frankly does not have. And it's part of the reason I really defend the slice of the Death Star for $1,000, because this is a representation of all the really cool scenes of the Death Star all at once that you take just a glance at and you get to enjoy. It's a great display piece. Versus if you panel that off or make it this ugly ball for $1,000, I don't know. I don't quite see it as the same value to me. So obviously value is subjective in a lot of ways, like I said, but I think it's pretty clear that this one is the worst value. It's got the worst price per piece, it's got the worst price per fig, at least of the two qualifying sets. So like I said, value can be super subjective, and you may disagree with me on some of the ways that I'm analyzing these sets, but when you break it down to the price per piece, price per gram, and price per fig, in all three categories, this set is worse than this set. So how could you possibly argue that it's a better value? You can't. You just can't. So I think it's off the table, literally and figuratively. I just came up with that on the spot. That was a good one. Bringing these two sets closer together, I think it's almost a coin flip to figure out which one is the better value. You consider this one's got a better price per piece, this one's got a better price per gram, but this one, of course, has a lot more minifigures, which affect its price per gram. Like, this one is not this heinously overpriced set that people make it out to be. Now, that doesn't stop it from missing the mark in certain places, like dual molded legs, or the fact that it's literally not a complete package after the first 7 days of its release, as you'll be missing the TIE fighter and the hangar that's supposed to go there with a couple extra stormtroopers and the pilot. Like, that's ridiculous stuff, and for $1,000, you should get the complete package. But that being said, when you look at the numbers of it, this is not a bad value, at least if you're comparing it to this. I just don't think that's an unfair statement to say. Even though it's the most expensive set ever, it is definitely not the worst value set ever. And I can't believe I'm coming to this conclusion, but I'm pretty sure this is a better value for your money than this. That being said, it very much depends on what you value. If you value having a Death Star that looks like this, big ball, you're going to pick this one. If you value having a Death Star that has all the cool scenes and minifigs and stuff like that, you're going to pick this one. And I think that's fair in both cases, but I just think by the numbers and when you factor in all the figures, this one from 2025 is kind of low-key the best value. When it comes to my opinion on these Death Stars and which one I like the best, I think it's pretty crazy that 2025 isn't the bottom of the barrel. When I first heard this is what they were coming out with, I thought it would be horrible, the worst Death Star ever, and it's just not. I think it makes this look like the worst Death Star ever. I no longer care for the 2008/2016 design almost at all. I respect it as an OG LEGO Star Wars set, a set that I owned when I was younger, a really cool play set. You know, it's got a lot going for it, but when you put it side by the marvels that are the 2005 Death Star and 2025 Death Star designs, I don't think 2008/16 really stack up anymore. It's pretty putrid. And just like during the value discussion, we are left with the two Death Stars from 20 years apart. The 2005 Death Star with its very cute Super Star Destroyer, and the 2025 Death Star with its dope hot tub Stormtrooper. But what makes it difficult for me to pick which Death Star is truly my favorite or the better in my opinion is how conceptually different these sets are. I mean, it's almost like saying, hey, let's compare this Death Star to that General Grievous and decide what's the better set. Like, they're both excellently done versions of what they set out to be, and that's what makes it tough to me. Like, I can really appreciate both of these sets, but I also really hate what they did with some of the things on this set, like the lack of dual molded legs, the day one DLC. Like, there are definitely some issues here, but also on the whole, when you look at it side by side, it's amazing, and it makes that one over there look really dumb. Like, this would be such an easier comparison if it was like Turbo Tanks, where you just look at the new one and be like, oh, it's tiny and ugly, and the old one's better. This isn't that same vibe to me. I know a lot of people look at it, the $1,000 price tag, and immediately just say it's the worst, but I think it's, not that simple. So when it's this close during the opinion category, and this one is especially tough because of just how different these two sets are, I try to just boil it down to a simple way of thinking. Like, if LEGO was only ever going to make one of these sets ever and the other two didn't exist, which one would be the one I would want? It just goes back to 2005 every time, partially because of nostalgia, but also it literally is the Death Star. Like, that's what the Death Star looks like. That is not what the Death Star looks like. It obviously has things like the laser cannon that definitely are aspects of the Death Star, but it is not literally a model of the Death Star, and in that way, I think of it as lesser than that Death Star, but it's still a very cool abstract representation of the Death Star. It's not far behind that. I could very easily have seen myself liking this model better or picking this model over that one if this one didn't have the flaws that it does have. But also, I almost, like, in my head, I'm like, oh, well, who cares? It's just still really cool, and it is better, but I mean, yeah, you just get, that one doesn't have flaws. This one does. And so, like, I just don't think it's right to put something without flaws over something with flaws. So 2016 is going to get a singular point in the opinion category. 2025 is going to get 2 points, and 2005 is going to get the full 3 points. And I would say it is not particularly close between 2016 and the other two. The other two are much closer than 2016 is to either of them. And now that we've compared everything about these three different types of UCS Death Stars, it's time to tally up that final score and take a look at what you guys voted as the best and worst on my Instagram poll. So with 10 points, last place, we've got the 2016 Death Star. This is very much to me and I don't want to play with you anymore moment. Like, I used to like this model, but this one came out, and this one was already better, and I just don't care about this model anymore. It's just dead last to me, and going through every category, it has turned out that it is the worst. So 2016, I just don't love anymore. It is what it is. We're getting a divorce. Now in second place with 12 points, slightly ahead of 2016, we have the 2005 UCS Death Star. This thing is magnificent. It will always, in my opinion, stand the test of time, although maybe that'll change when they release another big panel Death Star that makes this look bad. But for now, this is to me the second best Death Star, and I love it. Still love it. So 2005, and of course that means in first place the 2025 Death Star Slice Pancake $1,000 Death Star. Absolutely insane to me that this one ended up being the best. If I was going to bet money earlier in the year where this would end up in the comparison, I would have bet a lot of money on it being last place because I thought this was a horrible idea for a set when I heard it as a rumor. But in real life, it is magnificent looking. Its only true flaw to me is that it's got some poor quality minifigs for its time. That's what it's really missing to me. So I like this set a lot. 13 points in first place, just barely ahead of 2005, but I think it's quite deserving of that. And there is one other thing that this set has that none of the other sets have. that's Easter eggs. This set's got a ton of Easter eggs inside. Check out my review of this set if you want to see all of those in depth, but that's something that these other sets didn't have that this one does that's just really fun about it, so it's something to enjoy. And one more thing, I did an Instagram story poll, and the voting turned out the same exact way as this comparison. 2016 was the worst, 2005 the second best, and 2025 the best. And honestly, I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought the viewers would vote for this one to be the best, just from what I saw with people saying online. So it's very interesting that I just did a random poll, no strings attached. I was just like, which Death Star is the best? And people voted 2025 as well. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Of course, make sure you guys check out today's sponsor, RAKUTEN, and use my link in the description below when you sign up to get that $50 cash back bonus when you spend $50 within the first 90 days. If you're going to buy the new Death Star, it'd be good to use. And hit the like button if you enjoy. You can check out more LEGO Star Wars comparisons on the end screen now.